This is the economy and well-being gauntlet. And the first topic is a topic that's very close to my heart, actually, and that is student loan debt. As someone who grew up in a single parent household where my mother was a preschool teacher for the majority of my life, which means she didn't have a big salary, I know how expensive it can be to fund college. And in fact, I've taken on the overwhelming majority of my own student loan debt. And there is no reason that in a country as wealthy as ours, that people are taking on a lifetime of debt merely to receive an education. And so I want to make going to college a lot easier for folks who really would not be able to attend without taking on mountains of debt. For example, I want to first fund and finance public colleges and HBCUs to the point where we can severely lessen how much it costs to attend, if not make them free. I also want to make sure that those making under 140K in combined household income can have their kids go to college for free. Because again, there is no reason in a country as wealthy as ours that we are not on par with similar Western countries where people are going to school either for free or for very cheap, like $800 a semester. Moreover, I would like to make sure that we forgive all current student loan debt. Right now, it is a huge, huge drag on our economy. And not only that, but people cannot start their lives. They can't start families. They can't buy homes. They can barely afford to live in some cases. It is time that we put an end to punishing people for simply seeking an education. And when I'm elected to office, that's exactly what will happen. And now I'm going to talk about tax reform. I'm going to go on record and say that being a billionaire is unethical. Because there have been studies that have shown that in order to become a billionaire, you essentially have to cheat your way there. You either have to pay your employees less than a living wage, or you have to take advantage of loopholes in our current tax system. This is unfair, and it's overwhelmingly not good for our economy in the long term. So what I want to do is, one, fix any loopholes that allow corporations and billionaires to be able to slip through the cracks and totally advantage themselves while disadvantaging the rest of us and the working class. Many of those loopholes were created by the Trump administration, but many were also created by centrist Dems, or some consider them corporate Dems, who were okay with corporations really getting away with these types of things. And now we've come to an era where we know that these things do not work. It does not help to boost the economy. It does not help everyday people. And we have to make a change. So one thing I want to do is definitely fix those loopholes within our tax system where it allows billionaires and corporations to get away with the type of games that they play. I also want to make sure that we're bolstering the estate tax. There is a group of people in this country whose wealth has benefited from laws that kept certain people out. There are people who benefited from laws that allowed certain people to buy houses, and certain people, depending on their race, gender, nation of birth, etc., were not able to buy houses. There are people in this nation who benefited from laws that allowed folks to borrow money from banks, while other folks, because of their race, their gender, or their nation of birth, were not allowed to borrow in those same ways from banks. And what this has caused over time is a vast wealth inequality problem. And so in order to fix that, part of what we have to do is make sure that we're bolstering the estate tax so that the money that people inherit that really came from a system that was not fair to everyone, that they are paying back into the system so that we can right the wrongs of the past. Moreover, I want to make sure that we're bolstering the luxury tax. Listen, if you can buy a yacht, I'm happy for you. If you can buy a limousine, I'm happy for you. If you can buy a sports car, I am happy for you. I love sports cars. But the fact of the matter is, these are not necessities. There are people in our nation who have real need, such as the need to have to feed themselves, buy groceries, put their kids through preschool, etc. And it's going to take all of us recognizing that, hey, I have a little bit of privilege, so this tax on this luxury item that I don't need, but I can buy if I want, this tax on there will go towards helping those families. And I want to make sure that we are keeping up with the luxury tax and making sure that we are taxing these luxury items so that we can build back a better economy and a better country, especially for the working class and people who need it most. Now I'm going to talk about fair trade. Right now, we have a system where American workers are not getting paid, and really corporations are screwing them over. We need to start working and make sure we have trade deals that benefit our workers, our American workers, as well as other workers throughout the globe. These types of relationships need to be symbiotic. There can't be winners and losers where typically the winners are corporations. There needs to be a symbiotic relationship where our American workers are winning, workers that we have partnerships with overseas are winning, and we can have corporations and companies win a little bit, but not too much. Next up is expanding Social Security. One thing that is really different that has changed in our time that really wasn't around back when Social Security was first created is the fact that we have a gig economy. Unfortunately, our jobs have not been that strong, and it's been very difficult for young folks, no matter how educated they are, to really have long-term employment at different places, as well as well-paying employment in different places. What I want to do with my platform is expand Social Security and make it stronger so that no matter when people retire, they can retire all at a reasonable age, and no matter how much they worked or for how much they worked, they will still have enough money to get them through the rest of their days comfortably, safely, and with a roof over their heads. Next, we have a federal jobs guarantee. I am 100% in favor of a federal jobs guarantee. In fact, one of the ways that we can kind of hit two birds with one stone here is if we have a federal jobs guarantee in conjunction with Green New Deal jobs. Imagine we have government-funded infrastructure jobs that are guaranteed. Again, if you're in between jobs, or if you're looking for a job, or if you just, for some reason, you're out of work and you want to have a jobs guarantee and work for the government, guess what? You can go to work building green infrastructure. You can go to work building green residential homes. You can go to work putting up solar panels. You can do all of these stuff, and it can be union jobs, they can be well-paid jobs, and they can be jobs that are guaranteed. So I touched already on my plan to make public colleges and HBCUs free to attend. But I want to touch on trade schools as well, because not everybody is going to want to go to a four-year college. And one of the great things that we should have in this country is the freedom of choice. If you want to go to a four-year college and you think that's something that suits you, great. If you are more fit, you think, for a trade school and you want to learn a trade, great. We absolutely need people in the trades, especially if we are going to be retraining the next generation of workforce to be green workers. And so with that, I would also like to make trade schools free to attend as well. Again, we are going to need these folks. If we are really going to implement a Green New Deal, we are going to need to have trained people in these areas. And this is the perfect place to start. And we finally got to it, a Green New Deal. So of course, I'm absolutely in favor of a Green New Deal. And one of the things that you'll all notice is that moderates and conservatives, when they criticize the Green New Deal, they say, oh, well, it's just this pie in the sky political hit job talking point. No, it is absolutely something that's going to be based very thoroughly in reality. One of the ideas that I want to bring to the table with regards to implementing a Green New Deal are called GIAs. That's Green Implementation Agencies. And the way these would operate is similar to the way SBAs, or small business associations, operate now, which is there are one or a few operating in each state. They receive funding from the federal government, and their job is to help facilitate green implementation in each state that they're in. So for example, they would help facilitate that by giving out loans for green projects, so low interest, zero down loans. They would also give out grants as well for small businesses that want to change over some things and how they operate so they become more green, as well as green infrastructure projects, and basically any place where the private sector is missing out and more people want to take on the responsibility of going green. They would also do what's, again, similar to the Small Business Association, which has different training programs for people who want to open small businesses. GIAs, Green Implementation Associations, would also give training for folks who want to get into the green industry, but don't know how and don't have that training at the moment. So that's one idea that I would really like to bring to the forefront so that we can really start to implement all the ideas behind a Green New Deal. Another thing that I would like to implement are the environmental core. The Environmental Corps would bring mostly young people, but it doesn't have to be young people, but similar to the Peace Corps, it would attract a lot of young people to come and work on different policy mechanisms and things that would benefit their communities and their local states in a green new way. So they would bring forward policies and do research in order to facilitate better environmental ideas and infrastructure, et cetera, for their communities. And finally, I also want to make sure that no matter what we're doing when it comes to implementing a Green New Deal, that we're making sure that the people who are most impacted by climate change are always at the forefront of our minds. And those people are people of color, indigenous folks, and the working class and poor. We need to make sure that no matter what we're implementing with regards to the Green New Deal, we always have some aspect that's making sure they're receiving those green jobs. That's making sure people in those categories are the first to receive training, okay? Because we cannot do this and we cannot leave people out when we're going forward, okay? We have to make sure that we have everybody on board, and ultimately that's my full plan to implement a Green New Deal. Next up, I want to talk about a living wage. And unfortunately, in the district that I'm running in, there is extreme wealth inequality. My district spans 3 counties in New Jersey: Hudson County, Essex County, and Union County. And those are the counties with the highest rates of wealth inequality in the entire state, and some of the highest rates of wealth inequality in the entire nation. That's an embarrassment. We need to start doing things to take care of the constituents here. On top of that, in New Jersey, Black women only make 57 cents to a white man's dollar. And Latina women, only 42 cents to a white man's dollar. We absolutely need fair pay as well if we want to start giving people real livable wages. And so my plan is, there's multiple things I actually want to do around this. One, I want to support a $19 minimum wage that's going to be connected to inflation so that we don't keep having to have this fight where it's like, oh, we've had this minimum wage, but it's not enough to get people to live off of, and we have to go back, we have to fight the whole fight again. Let's just tie it to inflation. Let's skip the whole fighting aspect, tie it to inflation, and be done with it. And then we can, no matter how much inflation goes up, people will certainly be taken care of with regards to a living wage. Number 2, I want to make reporting a lot stronger with regards to the gender pay gap. Right now in other countries, corporations that have over 200 employees, or businesses rather, that have over 200 employees are required to report publicly on their gender pay gap. I want to bring that here to the United States. I want to make sure that we're holding these companies accountable and making sure that every time they have to report on what their gender pay gap is within their company, and it has to be publicly available so we, the public, can make sure that they're doing the right thing and paying people fairly and paying people equally. So again, we really need to get it together when it comes to a living wage. People need food in their stomach. People need roofs over their head. People need to be able to live in this society and not suffer. And with that, that's my plan to really bolster a living wage and bolster a fair wage and an equal wage. Next up, we have a very, very good subject: unions. I am 100% in favor of unions. In fact, New Jersey is a pretty strong union state. We have a lot of union representation and really, really excellent people spearheading those unions and fighting for workers every day. But we need that nationwide. It can't just be a New Jersey thing. We need every single state to have strong union representation for their workers. So with that, I want to come out right now and say that I am 100% in favor of supporting the PRO Act. If you get me into Congress, I will not only vote in favor of the PRO Act, but I will be an active fighter on making sure that I get my colleagues who right now are kind of seesawing on the subject, which is incredible to me because how are you seesawing on workers' rights? But I will work to also get them on board as well, and any other mechanisms that will make it possible and easier, in fact, for workers to start unions and join unions. And finally, we have our last topic of the day, and that's breaking up monopolies. Listen, again, this is all about giving people a fair chance. Why should we have large corporations like Google or Apple or Amazon run everything when we have small businesses and we have people who are getting out there with the great ideas who also deserve to really compete in this market and, frankly, receive the benefits of competing well in this market? So One of the reasons that monopolies have so much power is because we give them so many benefits. One of them is not taxing them, which again, if we go back to some of my earlier answers, I absolutely want to tax corporations to a further extent than what was even around before the Trump administration came around and gutted taxes and gave so much tax breaks to corporations. But another thing that's often overlooked is how easy it is for these corporations to steal from smaller actors. So a fun fact that most people don't know is that in 2010, the Republican Congress changed our patent laws. Originally, our patent laws focused on a first to invent world, meaning if you invented something, you invented this camera, for example, if you could prove that you were the first to invent it, it didn't matter that another large company was going out there and selling it. That company would then owe you money if you took them to court and sued them over that. The Republican Congress has since changed things. We now live in a first to file world, which means if you're the first to file a patent, then it doesn't matter whether you invented it or not, you were the first to get that patent in. Now, here's the thing. A patent on the low end costs about 10K. Do you have just 10K sitting around? I know I don't. Most of you probably don't either. Most of the working class probably does not. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be able to have our ideas, our possible money-making and business-creating ideas stolen by these companies who have $10,000 to shell out like nothing. So right now, we live in a first-to-file world which greatly advantages corporations and big tech companies, and that has to end. When I'm elected, I want to bring legislation that will take us back to a first-to-invent world so that we can really get back to inventing openly and freely and safely without having our ideas snatched. And that way we can have even more businesses that grow to be Googles and Apples and Amazons without all the toxic stuff. So really, when I get in there, I want to break up monopolies by making sure that all of our ideas are protected and making sure that those corporations are taxed to the extent that they need to be taxed so that we can continue to facilitate these great programs within our society.